I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking about. But I think just, really going back to what you said about how through play you're able to really raise awareness. I think it's self-awareness actually, because through play you're able to really activate people. And because when you're having fun, maybe your guard is down, you really get to show, your vulnerable side, and that's a learning point, when you are engaging, you're trying to explain, no, but do it this way, and the other person, like, I don't understand what you're saying. It's like, how do you deal with that discomfort? How do you deal with that frustration? And that
Mhm.
can be very, very helpful in how you actually translate that into the workplace. So of course, uh, this show is, talking about empathy, and we're talking about empathy as a critical element. And I think I should have that here as a critical element for inclusive workplaces, right? And the question I'd like to ask you then is, at what point do you have people reaching out to you and saying, Ilana, help us? What is the process normally?
So when I first started 21 Toys, my joke is that I accidentally became an entrepreneur. I'm a designer. So I originally invented the empathy toy. It was my thesis project in university. I studied industrial design,
Mhm.
and it was originally designed for visually impaired students to play with their sighted classmates.
Mhm.
And it ended up getting some accolades or winning some awards. And then, much like most industrial designers, at least at that time, they said, this is a great idea. You should find a company to sell it to. And I thought, okay, I guess that's what I should do.
Mhm.
And then I'm super lucky. No one was interested in starting that company.
As usual.
Why? I wouldn't want to start an empathy company selling empathy toys to schools. But from day one, I think I had the benefit that everyone thought it was really fascinating and interesting, but I don't think anyone thought it was going to
Mm.
work as a business. And so I use that as a bit of a secret weapon, just because if there are no expectations, it's easier when you fail. And so I started off 21 Toys with, I had a very modest artist grant for about $1,200, and I built prototypes.
Wow.
So I had my one school project that I built in school, and then I made multiple versions of it and a website. And then I would either volunteer or sneak into education conferences, and I would leave the toys on the table,
Ah.
and then I'd walk away. So teachers would kind of swarm or ask, where did this come from? Who made this? And that's how I'd start a dialogue. Just because my first question was really, do schools need this? And then the next question as an entrepreneur is, well, are they going to buy it? Like, is there a
Mm.
value in it? And
Mhm.
I was very lucky. While I was doing that work, I was invited to give a TEDx talk. So I gave a TEDx talk on how I invented the
Mhm.
empathy toy. And thanks to that, a school board saw that on Twitter and reached out, and that's how they put in their first order. At the same time, right after I got off stage, the first person to talk to me was a facilitator. And they said, I would love to use this for corporate. And I said, corporate? What are
Wow.
you talking about? And then kind of kept it in the back of my mind. And then when we went into that school board and we delivered they pre-ordered 30 kits. We did a demo of the toy to a room of 30 educators, and it was not a demo. It was a professional development workshop. So we
Wow.
started with, this is how you use a toy with your students. Let's
Mhm.
try it out. 15 minutes in, we were unpacking what empathy means for an educator in the work that they do. And so from day one, it was we saw that opportunity that the toy is age agnostic, the toy is gender agnostic, it's like language
Mhm.
agnostic.
Mhm.
The opportunity to put play into the hands of young students all the way up to corporate teams, it was pretty obvious from day one. But I was genuinely confused when an HR consultant, I think at one of the corporate workshops that I ran, I was like, okay, this facilitator will get it. So I ran a workshop with him.
Yeah.
I said, any questions at the end of the workshops? And 3 people raised their hand and said, how can I buy this toy? I want to use it. And I said, you're also facilitators? And they're like, we're HR professionals. One of them was like, oh, I run an HR department. And I was like, looking like, what is like HR? Like, what are they talking about? So
Yeah.
it's all been really organic, and those were in the
Mm.
past few years. So all of the workshops and the training programs and the guidebooks that come with our toys,
Mhm.
all organically been developed through those early enthusiastic folks in education and in the corporate space.
Wow, that's amazing. I love the toys, and I just know that it's such a great way. And like you rightly said, with play, such a great way to really get people, asking those questions and really trying to understand the benefits of empathy. I mean, like we already know that we live in times right now where we need empathy. I mean, there's never been a better time to talk about empathy, and a lot of companies, a lot of schools are really going all in, to talk about empathy. And we have some. Okay, Eve has some. Okay, let's see here. Eve has something to say. Eve. Okay, so Eve says, I know some toy designers where I live, and went to an amazing symposium in Berlin on inclusive toy design last year. Fab to hear your thoughts. Very, very interesting. And then she also says, can we see any of the toys? I think you just reached out.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can grab them in a minute. Have them,
sure.
have them behind me. So they're you can find some really beautiful photos or videos of them on YouTube, and we can send links to them because it's much better to understand than as seeing them than speaking towards them. But yeah, I would say the thing that's been so interesting about putting play into the hands of folks is that from day one, when I started the business, we definitely chose an exceptional challenge, which was to talk about the value of play and at the same time talking about the value of empathy. And now with a failure toy with like resilience. And when I started the company, so when you said the quote from Time Magazine, so Time Magazine put the empathy toy as like a key technology shaping the classrooms of the future. This was 2014. Wow. And I remember saying, empathy seems to have arrived as becoming more mainstream, that folks in the education space are really understanding the value of it about a year into when we had started. So we had the fact that it was in Time Magazine as an empathy toy, incredible, like for us as a company, but it was also a really interesting data point that a wooden toy with no digital elements was called a future technology.
Amazing.
It really was incredibly validating. And I think with the corporate world and the value of empathy, we started to see that really pick up, I would say around closer to like 2014, 2015. So we've got Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, wrote like an entire book about how we transformed Microsoft with empathy. We've got like Stuart Butterfield, who is the inventor of Slack and formerly I think co-founded Flickr.
Oh, okay.
The value of empathy. Like a lot of thought leaders came out, and this was before Brene Brown. So what was interesting is kind of like the trend lines. Like I feel like we were very lucky. We were
the right time
years ahead.
Yeah.
So when COVID hit, it was it was a hugely existential moment for us because, as you know, everything we were doing up until that point was only in person. And there is a world where we might someday create a virtual version of gameplay, but I'm very biased. And also as an industrial designer, the value of 3D physical objects to represent the theoretical is incredibly valuable. To touch something, to feel it, to have weight to it. It gives it that value. It makes it really tangible. And so when COVID hit, we had an existential crisis where everything we were doing to that point was in person, which means everything stopped. All of the workshops we had booked that year stopped. All of the in-person training you took, that was our last in-person training.
I know. I was lucky.
And then I was thinking, well, what school is going to buy a physical toy? I don't even know if people are physically in schools. And we had a really intense moment of going, do we still make sense in this new world?
Right.
And the first, I think COVID officially was that Friday the 13th that happened. Everything went offline. And that Sunday, I got a message on WhatsApp from one of our biggest corporate clients that said, our team is really struggling. We now have to do remote work. People are very overwhelmed, really stressed out. We were really looking forward to that empathy workshop that we were going to fly out to. I think it was London or the US to run a workshop with like UX designers. And we actually need this now more than ever for our team. Can you do it online? And so that's what prompted us to figure out how to run our empathy toy workshops online. And by Wednesday, we had like a working prototype.
Wow.
And it didn't remove the toys, it complemented them. So instead of us showing up in person with a bag of toys like Santa Claus and we would play and then go back to Toronto, instead we would ship out the toys to folks' homes, and then we would all meet online and play. And it didn't even feel like, well, this is unexperienced. It's not as good as in person. It really met the moment. And that's how we're finding so many of the teams we work with now.
Wow.
Everyone is struggling to figure out how to work remotely, how to communicate remotely.
Exactly.
And also how to invest in your team. Because like the value of emotional intelligence since 2020, we are not fighting that battle as we did when we first started. Because in the early days, people would say, can we get an empathy workshop? And then they'd say, please don't call it that.
Why? Because it sounds like
they're in trouble. Because folks would say, why are we going to an empathy workshop? Are we in trouble? Is this like, it's been interesting to see the attitude change. Because for us, we're like, we don't have to call it the empathy toy. It's still going to be an empathy workshop. But we've had so many workshops, and I don't know if you've experienced this, where I've had my team back in the day when it was in person, they'd be in the elevator and one of the attendees, actually one of the bosses, was saying, oh, I'm going to this empathy workshop, and was talking about it. And our facilitators were there, and they said, I don't know why we're, something along the lines of like, why are we spending time on this? And I would say 9 out of 10 times, the person in the room who is wondering why it's happening, why we're investing in it, 45 minutes in, they're the one that stands up and declares, this is the most important thing in our company. They say, we need to start talking about empathy. And so giving folks the opportunity to play and being okay with them showing up where they're at, reaching their own conclusions, has been, for me, one of the most exciting parts of the workshops. And it's also easy for us because we're like, oh, great, someone who's not sure. That's great, because I'm for that person to tell me at the end of the workshop.
Yeah.
It's really important. So that's a really fascinating lens of folks might value it or understand it, but there's still folks that are uncomfortable with calling it that. They want to call it something else.
Yeah.